So in the lesson today, we're going to talk about changing equations into y equals mx plus b form. So if you take a look here, we have x plus y equals 3. So this is not written into y equals mx plus b. So what we need to do is we need to write it in y equals mx plus b. Now remember from what we talked about yesterday, so when we go y equals mx plus b, your m is your slope and your b is known as your y-intercept. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to take this x plus y equals 3 and we need to change that into y equals mx plus b. So we need to get our x over and we need to make sure that we isolate the y. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to subtract x from both sides. Okay, so we subtract x from both sides, so x minus x is 0. We can now drop the y, we can drop the equal sign, and so now we have negative x, and then that's a positive 3. So that would be negative x plus 3. You cannot combine those two because there's no x on 3. So here's our equation that is written into y equals mx plus b. So now that we have this in y equals mx plus b, we do the same thing that we did yesterday. So we need to figure out what is our slope, and we need to figure out what is our y-intercept. So remember, our slope is what's attached to the x, which in this case, there is a 1 here, but it's just not written. So there's a 1 here. So our slope is going to be negative 1, and our y-intercept is going to be a positive 3. Okay, so remember that y-intercept is where our equation is going to cross the y-axis. So in this case, because our y-intercept is positive 3, we're going to start at the origin, and we're going to move up 3. And there is our, that is going to be our y-intercept. So now what we need to do is we need to figure out our slope. So our slope is negative 1. Well, we need to write that as a fraction. So that's going to be negative 1 over 1. So that negative 1 is our rise. So that's telling us that we're going to go down. And the positive 1 is our run. And that's telling us that we're going to go right. So now we can also do the opposite. So instead of going down, we could go up. And instead of going right, we could go left. So when we go to plot this, we're going to follow this. So we're going to go down 1, right 1. So down 1, right 1. And then we're going to continue to do that until we get off of the graph. Okay? So we want to do this. We can, it's just a good habit to do because it gives us some practice with plotting the points and using the slope. And now we got to figure out the upper part of the graph. Okay, so we're going to go up 1 and then left 1. So up 1 and left 1, and we're just going to continue doing this. And then once we have this done, now we just need to draw our line. So when we do that, we need to make sure that we have our arrows. So we're going to draw the line, and we're going to have it go through that. Make sure that you put your arrows. Okay, so when we do that, that's our answer. Okay, so what I would like for you to do now, well, let's work one more problem. So if we take a look at this, we have 3x minus y equals negative 6. So we need to try to get y by itself. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the 3x. And so we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. Okay, so the 3x cancels out. We still have this negative y that we're going to drop. And we have dropped the equal sign. Now we cannot combine these two because there's no x on the 6. So we're just going to write that. So that's going to be minus 3x minus 6. Now we want y to be positive, so there's a negative here. So this says negative 1 times y. So to get rid of that negative, we are going to change the sign of everything over here. So we are going to divide by a negative 1. So we're going to divide by negative 1. We're going to divide this by negative 1 and divide this by negative 1. So when we do that, that's going to cancel out the negative. So we get y equals a negative 3 divided by 1. A negative 1 is going to be positive 3x. And negative 6 divided by negative 1 is going to give you a positive 6. So now that we have that, we can identify our slope and then identify what our y-intercept. So pause the video now and then finish the graph. So remember, we need to figure out what is our slope, and then we need to figure out what is our y-intercept. Once we know what our slope is, we need to draw our arrows, figure out our y-intercept that tells us our starting point, and then we need to finish the graph from there. Do the video, or pause the video now and do that. So you should be done with the problem now, and your graph should look like this. Okay? So let's move on to the next problem. So we have 2x minus 3y equals -9. So what I would like for you to do now is I would like for you to pause the video, and I would like for you to solve and get this into y equals mx plus b. So you should be finished now, so let's take a look at this. So the first thing we wanted to do is we want to get rid of the 2x. So because that's a positive 2x, we subtract 2x from both sides. That cancels this out. So we drop this -3y, drop the equal sign, and then these cannot be combined. So we go -2x minus 9. So now what we did here is, remember, we want y by itself. So that means we have to get rid of this -3. So this says -3 times y. So to get rid of that -3, we're going to divide. We're going to do the inverse operation, which means we're going to divide everything over here by -3. So we're going to divide -2 by -3 and -9 by -3. So when we do this, this is going to cancel out. So now we go -2 divided by -3. Well, we're just going to keep it as a fraction. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And then you're going to go -9 divided by -3, which is going to give you a positive 3. So this is our equation written in y equals mx plus b. So to figure out our slope, we can now just write what we need to. So that would be our slope, and then our y-intercept would be positive 3. So now that we have it like this, we can now graph it, which is what I would like for you to do. So pause the video now and graph it. We should be finished with the problem, and our graph should look just like this. Okay, so just remember, we're trying to get this into y equals mx plus b, so we're going to follow our inverse operations in order to achieve that. So let's take a look at number 4. So what we want to do here is we want to try to get y by itself. So we want to get rid of the 3. That's the only thing we have to do. So to get rid of the 3, we're just going to divide both sides by 3. And so doing that, that's going to give us y equals, because that 3's are going to cancel out. So now we go 6 divided by 3, which is 2, and then we just keep the x. So here's our equation, y equals 2x. So we now need to figure out what is our y-intercept and what is our slope. Well, our slope is 2 because y equals mx plus b, and we have no y-intercept, which means our y-intercept will be 0. So with this, now we just graph it. So our y-intercept is 0, so that's going to literally be right there at the origin. And so now we're going to go up 2, right 1. Okay, so up 2, right 1, and then we'll just continue doing that until we get to the top of our graph. And then we'll do the same thing going to the bottom. We'll go down to left 1. And as you do this, the more you do this, the easier it'll be to where you can do it without having to draw the arrows. But drawing the arrows are going to help you in making sure that you don't make a mistake and graph and go the wrong direction and get your graph going wrong. Okay, so moving on to the next problem. So on number 5, okay, it says, which ordered pairs are solutions to these equations? Okay, so the easiest way I know how to do this and to show this to you is for you to think of it like this. Okay, so here's the ordered pairs. So this is your x and this is your y. So what you can do is you can go into each of these problems, so into this problem, and you can plug in your x, which is -7, and plug in your y, which is -3. So what you could do is you could say 2 times your x, which is -7, okay, minus 5 times your y, which is -3. And when we solve that, we want that to equal 1, okay? Sorry about that. I forgot that I needed the calculator. So we're going to take this and we're going to plug this into our calculator. So we're going to go 2 times -7 minus 5 times -3. So when we do that, we want it to equal -1. I'm sorry, +1. So that equals +1. So we know that this is a solution. If it does not equal 1, then it is not a solution. So if we do the same thing here, so we're going to go 2 times 7. Okay, so we're on B now. And then we go minus 5 times 3. We want that to equal +1. Well, that equals -1. We don't want -1, we want +1. So B is not a solution, but C is. So we're going to do the same thing for C. We're going to go 2 times 2 minus 5, and then we're going to multiply that by 1. That equals -1. So C is not a solution. So we're going to do the same thing for D now. 2 times -2 minus 5 times -1. And that equals +1. So we know that that's a solution. So our answer to this is going to be A and D are solutions. So what you're going to do now on example 6 is you're going to do the same thing, okay? Take your X, take your Y, plug it in, and see if it equals 11. Pause video now. So you should be finished now. So when you plugged in A, you should have gotten 9. Okay, so when we plugged the 1 and the 3 in, you should have gotten 9. B is a solution. C is a solution because they both equaled 11 when you plug the numbers in. And when you plugged in D, you would have gotten 5. So our solutions to this would be B and C. Okay, so that concludes the lesson for today. Please make sure that you ask questions if you are confused with anything. Bring questions to class and make sure that you glue your information into your journal, and you'll have a good day.